One of our more common questions is, what does a sales QB do on a typical client engagement? The easiest place to begin is ask yourself, if I were hired as the full-time sales manager of this company, what would I do? You're all qualified to do that, to be the full-time sales manager. We're just going to fractionalize that. So if you ask yourself just that simple question, half the answers are right there. Then we're going to follow our roadmap to sales success, which will give you a blueprint to go in there. And then we need to focus on throttling our activities. And you do that by focusing on value, not the time input. Sometimes people stress, well, how am I going to do this in all the time? Don't worry, it'll be fine, and I'll explain how in a moment. In case you haven't seen it, this is our roadmap to sales success, or the path to guaranteed growth, and it contains 6 steps. By the time you get into the client, you'll have already done the audit, and we recommend following this framework for a couple of reasons. The most important reason to use the roadmap is I think it provides an instant credibility. Just take these 2 simple examples. I walk in, I talk sales with you, you see that I know what I'm doing, and I kind of follow the I'm a smart guy, I can help system. And it takes a certain amount of time, energy, and effort to get the prospect to feel like you're an expert. Option 2, I walk in and I say, we've got people across the country that are using our roadmap to sales success as a 6-part framework to tune up any sales system. And of course, Mr. Business Owner, your system is different than everyone else's, but this framework works in every situation. The fact that I have a graphic, the fact that I have a 6-step system, and the fact that I can talk to that system just gives me much more credibility, much faster than if I just use the I'm a smart guy, I can help system. That's the biggest reason to use it. It makes you look smarter faster. And you can play within the system. Don't think it's rigid and it's not the Bible around here. It is a tool designed to help you. That's it. But it is in the order it's in for a reason. For instance, people that have a lot of sales training experience always want to go to fixing the people. And we sell against sales training. So you want to do that last because there's a lot of receptivity with the client about leaving the salespeople alone. They may be dead wrong, but if you attack, let's go fix the salespeople, you're going to lose deals. Trust me. So we want to follow the system of process first, people second. And if you'll follow that approximately, you can play around. That I know I've had sales QBs call me and say, hey, the client wants to focus on number 4 first. That's fine. Focus on number 4 first. I would not focus on fixing the people first. It'll blow up in your face. But we put it in this order for a reason, and it's because the client is receptive to that process, and it also makes your life simpler. And we've got tools that hang off of each of these. As you may have learned from some of our conversations, each of the steps in these process have a tool. The audit has the software. The proven and repeatable sales process has a couple of tools, the big one being the sales map workbook. That is a 9-step process that will help you make this proven and repeatable sales process. The next point I want to emphasize is relying on your experience and skill. There is no in-a-box sales management system or piece of software that we could write that would be anywhere near as good as simply you going in and applying your personal filter and experience to this situation. So ask yourself, if you were walking into an engineering company with 5 employees that had, a hard time generating leads other than the personal connections of the engineers at the firm, what would you do? Well, they probably need some lead flow, so you'd analyze how they got the clients that they got, and you'd realize that they get a lot of business from referrals, but they have no formal referral system because they never do, and then you would go about doing that. And keep in mind, we're only in there for 4 hours. Sometimes people think like an employee, and that is, I'm going to walk in there, I got to show love to this person, and I've got to go put in 80 hours a week to do this. That's not how we work. We have to throttle because they're not paying for our full-time. They're not paying you anywhere near what you're worth full-time. You have to kind of make it last. And I don't mean throttling in a negative way. I mean, we want to deliver a lot more value than they're paying for, but I don't want to deliver 20 times the value they're paying for. 3, 4, 5 times is fine. And you do that by putting in a reasonable amount of effort and giving them good value for what they're paying for. But it takes time to do it our way. And keep in mind, the client can't afford to do it full time. And also, please keep in mind, sometimes people forget this, The client is making zero progress on this stuff now. They have for 10 years not made any progress on any of these items. So yes, we may go in and it may go slower than the client would like or you would like. Frankly, the client won't even know. They'll just see progress. But you'll know, hey, we could be going faster. But they're not paying you to go full speed. They're just paying you to go fast on this. And you are going fast because you're going much faster than they would without you. Like I said, it's important to focus on value, not time. They don't care about the 4 or 5 hours a week that you're giving them. What they care about is that they're making a lot more money than you're charging, and that's what you should focus on too. In fact, in our training, we have this conversation/script that we use with the client at the beginning to say, hey, listen, I don't want to be a white collar clock puncher. This is not a factory that I work at. You want me thinking about your business when I'm at another client because they may have a best practice that could make you $1 million. And if I'm just a factory worker, you don't get that best practice. What you want is a piece of me, not my time. But what we do by nature is skimming the cream, meaning the lawyer doesn't stuff the envelopes for the letter that they write because they make $500 an hour and it's not worth them stuffing the envelope. Same thing with us. We do all the things that are the highest value to move the sales needle, and we don't do the low value things. Like for instance, we almost never do ride-alongs because we've got to generate $200-300 an hour worth of value, and that's usually not worth $200 or $300. So it just doesn't get done. We have to find another way to do that. Let me share some highlights from typical engagements, and this will not be one specific client, but what typically happens at clients, and I'll break it down according to the roadmap. So we'll have already done the audit before we go in there, step 1, and then we'll go into step 2. And we focus on lead flow first because that is the easiest way to show the client love. You know, I don't want you to feel like they've got their finger on you and you're under this intense pressure. It's actually not the case, but sometimes prospective licensees feel like it is going to be the case. It is not. This person's got 10 years of pent-up problems and they've made no progress on them, and now all of a sudden they've got someone in there doing anything. That will be wonderful. But we want to focus on lead flow because it's the easiest thing to measure, and all of a sudden they see a lead, and the first part that we do is actually get the client to understand what a lead is worth. We've got an exercise called the value of a lead. The reason that they don't have enough leads is they're valuing a lead at $50 in their head. They've never actually run the math, by the way, but they're valuing it in their head at $50 or $100, and it's usually worth, $1,000, $2,000, something significantly more than what they value it at. And therein lies the problem, that if they really want more business, they really need more leads. If they really need more leads, they actually have to spend 100% of what it costs. That they're doing the 50% of nothing game, and they're not getting any leads because they're just flat out under investing. So the biggest aha you may get month 1 is getting them to realize, hey, knucklehead, the reason you're not getting any leads is because you're grossly under investing in them, and that is the problem. So we'll do that exercise, then we'll get to work, and now they'll understand just how valuable a lead is, and your efforts will be rewarded. Some of the things that we've done on these: create formalized referral programs. They don't have one. They just kind of wait for people to refer, and in general, customers stink at referring. So we have to go chase referrals, not just wait for referrals. You don't need to be a techie around here, but there's some easy things that anyone, techie or not, can do with AdWords or search engine optimization, or an easy one: put a chat box on their website. It's usually free, but you will get leads from a chat box. It's that simple. Or Google Places is another easy one. It's pretty easy to get up toward the top of Google Places for most people, and they don't even have their listing up there if they're B2B. Another real simple one that looks like it's worth $1,000 and it'll take you 5 minutes. Retargeting, Google retargeting. If you don't know what it is, we'll cover it in the training. Very inexpensive, very powerful, and almost no one is doing it. You can win a lot of points for doing something that takes an hour to do. Another one is they typically don't outbound, that they've got no one actually picking up the phone, calling a customer, asking how it's going, asking for referrals, flat out cold calling. You can do a lot of damage by just getting a part-time person in there to actually make some calls. And I'm a big fan personally of not asking the salespeople to do it. They're not doing it for a reason. Just fall on the sword and say they're not going to do it, and let's go get someone that their only job is picking up the phone. That's what works the best in my experience. And don't feel like it needs to be a full-time. I remember I bumped into a guy in Louisville, Kentucky that ran a mowing service. So it's seasonal. And this guy had the simplest system. He had some friend that came in for the month of February, called every customer and said, hey, you want to buy some lawn mowing or whatever they did. And all she did was work for a month, and then he got rid of her. And people don't think like that. They think forever, and it doesn't need to be forever. It can just be for 3 weeks, and then you're done. You've blown through the whole list. The next step in the process is what we call a PRSP, a proven and repeatable sales process. In general, they don't have one. They have never thought, okay, if I start someone new, how do they actually go do it? And this is probably the most powerful of all the items on the list, because what the company typically is doing is relying on the salespeople to make their own sales process. Now, this is my thesis, but I found it to be true, and that is I don't think that great salespeople are great at selling or possess some magical skill. I think that what they're great at is figuring out how to sell stuff. And bad people, it's the same thing. Average people and bad people have no clue how to sell stuff, and they sell with bad process, not good process. So fixing the process is magical. What it will do is it will make the bad people better, it'll make the average people better, it may not make the good people better, but they're not our problem. It's the average people. But these companies have never thought about how we do it. And so when you effectively make this massive, complex, giant wall flow chart, what you're going to find is a bunch of holes where they actually need a little miniature version of what they sell to put on the person's desk, or they need a brochure, or they need something on their website, or they need a magic line to say when this certain thing happens, because it always happens, or they need what we call scorched earth points, which is something that's in our sales map. So one of the big tools we have around this is what we call a sales map. And it's a workbook that has a 9-step process that you go through to help create this proven and repeatable sales process. And I promise you, even as the author of that book, that if I go in and try to make a PRSP without that workbook, it will not be as good as if I do use it. That the process is really powerful, and just following that process will yield a much better PRSP. Next, we're going to focus on the technological aspects of selling. Now, don't freak out if you don't consider yourself a techie. You do not need to be a techie in order to be successful at this step. Now, if you are, we've got salesQBs who literally were digital marketers before they came to salesQB, and they've done very well kind of overemphasizing this step. So if you are techie, I assure you, businesses that we work with are typically horrible at this. It is their weakest point of everything besides maybe the PRSP, but let's face it, digital can be part of that PRSP as well. We have something we call sales virtualization. That is a pretty robust piece of training and a program that we have created that talks about how to take sales out of the hands of humans and put it into electrons, because it's cheaper and more effective if you do it right. So we're certainly prepared to deal with this, but I don't want you to feel like you have to be some technological guru in order to succeed at this, because the biggest one, of course, is under leverage of CRM. Most of the people that we see have a CRM, but they're not using it well, and they're really not using it as a tool. It's not supposed to be just a way to beat on your salespeople. It's supposed to build your sales process and help you manage and control that sales process. Well, they're not doing that well. Another one of my favorites is FAQs. I'm doing one right now. This is an FAQ. I always say they're called frequently asked questions for a reason, and it could be as simple as figuring out what the top 10 FAQs are, writing them up in text, and putting them on a web page. You'd be dumbfounded how powerful something as simple as that is, because from a customer service point of view and from a sales point of view, People don't want to deal with humans anymore. They want to research. They want to self-sell. And if we let them self-sell, it lets the salespeople do things of higher and better use. The customer has not invested in these. I think you should be prepared that you may need to write them. I just wrote one yesterday for a client. It was 3 lines on why does an industrial computer get too hot. And I interviewed the client. They literally told me the 5 or 6 bullet points, but by golly, they weren't going to write it up. And I know this seems weird, but it's true. Clients, they're busy, and it's just one more thing to do for them. I think that you should view a situation like this not as, oh my gosh, I'm doing something that's a $10 or $20 task for the client. You don't view it that way. This is kind of an insight into our world. I assure you, if I did not write that FAQ and finalize it so they could just post it on a web page, a year from now it wouldn't be done. And you need to gauge the value of what you do, not based upon I wrote a paragraph, but on there is a valuable FAQ up on a web page now that would not be there if I didn't do what I did. And that might be worth $1,000, not $20. And that is exactly the way that our business works, is we help things get done that would never get done if we weren't there. Another one is I love videos, but you're going to need to be prepared that you will help them script. You may need to go to the video shoot with them. That's a good use of time because videos have a 5 or 10 year shelf life. I will even cop to, I had a client that I did one of these talking PowerPoints for. And I offered to go to the owner of the business, sit with him while he did about 2 minutes worth of audio work. Could not get him to do it. This company had a big investor. The investor was a little bit more pragmatic. And so for the investor, I basically demoed this thing. So I said, hello, I'm Joe Blow from ABC Computer, blah, 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 and played it for the pragmatic investor. The investor realized that the owner was never going to do it, and so out there somewhere in the web is a video of me saying that I am somebody else that really isn't meant to be deceptive. It's just meant to get the dang thing done. There's 10 people a year going to listen to this thing, and no one knows who the owner is anyway, so it doesn't matter. But this is how it plays out a lot of times, is that these things get stuck because they're either out of resources, they just don't want to do it, and we can create tremendous value just by pushing them over the finish line. When we get to step 5, the sales management piece, this will be rolling off a log for you because it's just going to be what you would do if you were the sales manager combined with a little bit of throttling. That if you were there 50 hours a week, you obviously would probably do more sales management than we're going to do. So you need to pay attention to being highly effective in the way that you do it. So I'll tell you a couple of cheats. Cheat number 1 is don't let the salespeople be unprepared. That what you will probably need to end up doing is nicely refusing to work with them if they're unprepared for your meeting, because you don't have time to spend an hour with them when you could get through it in 15 minutes if they just were prepared. You don't have the luxury of them being unprepared, and if you set up that system and ownership knows that that's the way it's going to work, you're bulletproof because you've done your job and the salesperson hasn't done their job. So a couple of other little tricks that we use is, I'm not a big fan of weekly meetings unless you have a big sales staff, and you may want to divide that staff in half. If you've got 10 people, do 5 and 5 if you do it every week. But the trick is, how much benefit do you really get from that meeting? And if you run the math on what it cost to have that meeting, is that really the best use of $5,000 of total team time to have that meeting, or would we be better off to just have it every other week and get close to the same value for half of the time investment? You want to create a pipeline. They don't have one. They don't have anything resembling a pipeline or an accountability model. And another trick that I love is having just a top 10 list. Okay, Ms. Salesperson, who are the 5 or 10 people that you have to close? And then here's the trick. You just are like a dog with a bone, and you never let those 5 go, and you keep talking about those 5, and here's what will happen. You will realize that she or he can, either has the chops or doesn't have the chops to close these people, or it'll find holes in the sales system. If you say you want to get this customer, why can't we make progress on that? Well, it's either a skill problem or a process problem, and this will help you expose those. The last piece of the puzzle is coaching, and this is what you will do long term, that at some point it just becomes typical sales management, occasionally looking at the process, the technology, etc., and coaching. Now, if you're a sales training type, this is where you can mix in some of your skills, knowledge, sales training. A lot of times working those into the meetings is great, but I would recommend that you act more as a coach than a sales trainer for a couple of reasons. Number one, we have found that sales coaching is better at changing behavior than sales training, because you've seen it. You've seen these salespeople that absorb the knowledge just fine, but it doesn't translate into better sales because they don't change their behavior. And what they really need to do is sometimes jump up on the desk and stomp in front of a customer and demand to be seen, or sometimes they need to soften, or sometimes they need to just insist that they're going to meet with the committee, whatever it would be, but they need to do something differently, and that requires coaching. So I always start my engagements with pre-briefing and post-briefing the most important calls. Okay, you've got a call with ABC distributors tomorrow. What's your game plan, George, to go in there and move it forward? Particularly, what is the outcome of the meeting that is both the minimum standard that you're willing to accept, and what is your desired goal? Those are different. This is a really simple thing that makes a huge difference, is there's a minimum standard that is acceptable. Just going in saying, hi, I'm buying the person lunch is not an acceptable standard. By the same token, we don't need to walk out with an order in order for it to be moving forward. Most salespeople don't think of it that way. They think, I want to get X, and then they don't know what to do about the minimum standard, and they blow it. So coaching can go a long way there. And then post-briefing that, how did it go? What could you have done better? If you had a do-over, what would you do, etc. But just working with them as a coach, as a trainer, as a mentor will go a long way to not only helping that salesperson in their career, because they may not be here forever, and then number two, helping the company increase their sales. I hope this video has given you some insight into a typical salesQB engagement and help you determine whether the skills that you have are a good fit.